April 6, 2026. Two messages land in a newsroom inbox within hours of each other. The first one says she is gone. The second one says she was spotted alive across the border in Mexico. Same sender. Same day. Two completely opposite claims. That right there is not confusion. That is something else entirely. This is not a thriller. This is not a dramatization. What you are about to hear is a real case. One that has gripped the country for over 60 days, drawn in federal investigators, and left an entire family in a state of waiting that most people cannot begin to imagine. The name at the center of it is Nancy Guthrie.
They threatened to kill Nancy Guthrie. We had not heard that until now. We always knew that there was a consequence threatened if you don't pay by Thursday. Then by Monday, there's a second deadline, and the consequence is that the money goes up, I think, to $6 million. But we never heard that the other consequence was that they threatened to kill Nancy Guthrie.
Pay close.
84 years old. A mother. A grandmother. A woman with a routine so consistent that the people closest to her could almost set a clock by it. Church attendance. Family calls. A life built around presence and predictability. And then, without warning, she was gone. Hi viewers, before we go any further into this case, there's something this team genuinely wants to know from you. If someone you loved went missing and the only updates were coming through tabloid media instead of law enforcement, would you trust them? Drop your answer in the comments below. It matters more to this story than you think. Now, January 31st, 2026. Catalina Foothills, just outside Tucson, Arizona. It is a quiet area. The kind of neighborhood where people know their neighbors, where desert air settles thick and still after sundown, and where nothing about that particular Saturday night felt unusual. At 9:50 in the evening, Nancy Guthrie was dropped off at her home by her son-in-law, Tommaso Sioni. He watched her go inside. Everything appeared completely normal. There was no argument, no tension, no reason to worry. That was the last confirmed moment anyone saw her.
The search is over, but the nightmare is just beginning. At exactly 3:42 a.m. this morning, the dark, stagnant waters of the Blackwood Canal gave up a secret that has instantly paralyzed the entire investigation.
By morning, the silence had already started to harden into something else. Nancy had a scheduled church live stream she never missed. Sunday came and went, and she wasn't there. Family members reached out. No response. They tried again. Still nothing. By around 11 in the morning on February 1st, concern had moved past manageable and into something urgent. Relatives arrived at the house. What they found stopped everything. Her phone was still inside. Personal belongings sat right where they always were. Nothing visibly out of place. But Nancy was not there. And the longer they stood in that house looking around, the clearer it became. This was not a woman who stepped out and forgot to tell someone. At noon, the family called 911. Within hours, investigators would begin reconstructing the night, and what the surveillance footage eventually showed changed the entire frame of the case. At approximately 1:47 in the morning, the doorbell camera at Nancy's home was disabled. Not by a technical failure. Not by weather. Deliberately disabled. Minutes after that, a figure appeared. Masked. Moving with intention. No forced entry. No screaming. No chaos. Just Nancy, and then the absence of Nancy. The Federal Bureau of Investigation entered the case alongside the Pima County Sheriff's Department. Within days, more than 400 personnel were working across search operations, reviewing footage, tracking movement patterns, and fielding tips that flooded in from across the country. Roads surrounding Tucson were covered. Every lead was taken seriously. And still, nothing. No suspect named. No confirmed sighting. No trace. Then, on February 3rd, something arrived that shifted the investigation in a direction no one was fully prepared for.
That they actually do have a potential suspect in the case, and the identity is rather shocking.
We're getting some breaking news in the investigation into the disappearance of Nancy Guthrie.
We search for Nancy Guthrie.
A note sent directly to the family. It demanded $6 million in Bitcoin. But here is what made law enforcement take it seriously, and this detail is important. The note contained specific information about Nancy and the circumstances of her disappearance that had never been made public. Information that, at that point, only someone directly connected to what happened could have known. That changed everything. For the first time since she vanished, there was a reason, a cold, calculated, evidence-based reason, to believe Nancy Guthrie might still be alive. Investigators moved fast. Bitcoin wallets were tracked. Coordination extended across the border. Mexican authorities were contacted. The case was no longer just a local missing persons report. It had become something far more complex, with threads pulling in multiple directions at once. And just when the investigation appeared to be building towards something, a new voice entered the story. Not through law enforcement. Not through the family. Through a media outlet. Starting February 11th, messages began arriving at TMZ. Not from the original sender. From someone else entirely. Someone claiming to have information. Someone asking to be paid for it. Someone who, from the very beginning, refused any contact with law enforcement. The amounts kept shifting. 1 Bitcoin. Then $70,000. Then $35,000. The price of whatever they were selling kept dropping, and yet the messages kept coming. And then came April 6th. The morning Savannah Guthrie, Nancy's daughter, one of the most recognized journalists in American television, returned to the air after more than 60 days away. The public watched. The country watched. And that same morning, the same sender sent 2 messages. One said Nancy was gone. One said Nancy had been seen alive in Sonora, Mexico, a region less than 70 miles from Tucson. Same person. Same day. Directly contradicting themselves. Former FBI agent Jason Pack reviewed the pattern and put it plainly: real witnesses do not contact tabloid media. Real informants do not demand cryptocurrency payments. And real sources, people with actual knowledge, do not send 2 opposing accounts within hours of each other and expect to be believed. Somewhere in the space between those 2 messages is either a calculated deception, a person unraveling, or something far more troubling about what actually happened to Nancy Guthrie on the night of January 31st. The investigation is still open. No arrests have been made. No confirmed location has been established. And a family is still waiting. This case is not over. If this is the kind of reporting that keeps you thinking long after you've stopped watching, subscribe right now and turn on notifications. There are more stories coming to this channel, real cases, real people, real consequences, and you will not want to be the last one in the room to hear what happens next. Share your thoughts below. Your perspective might be the one that starts the conversation someone else needed to have. The ransom note changes everything. February 3, 2026. 3 days after Nancy Guthrie was reported missing. 3 days of searches, press conferences, tip lines, and silence from whoever took her. Then the letter arrives. It goes directly to the family. Not to law enforcement. Not to the media. To the people closest to Nancy. The ones already operating on almost no sleep, waiting by phones, trying to hold themselves together while federal agents comb through surveillance footage and coordinate across county lines. The demand is $6 million. In Bitcoin. Now, ransom demands are not automatically credible. In high-profile cases, false claims surface constantly. People looking for attention. People looking for money. People who follow a case closely enough to sound like they know something when they do not. But this note was different. Buried inside the language of that letter were details, specific, verifiable, non-public details.
For 22 days, we were told Nancy Guthrie was missing. We were told she walked away. But as the heavy industrial cranes pulled a submerged vehicle from the silt today, the truth didn't just come to light, it shattered the reputations of everyone involved.
About Nancy and about what happened on the night she was taken. Information that investigators had not released. Information that had not appeared in any news report. Information that, at that point in the investigation, only someone with direct knowledge of the event could have written down. That matters. It means law enforcement had to take it seriously. The FBI's response was immediate. Bitcoin wallets connected to the demand were identified and placed under tracking. Coordination expanded beyond Arizona, beyond U.S. jurisdiction. Mexican authorities were formally contacted. The theory that Nancy had been moved south, across a border less than an hour from Tucson, became a working direction in the investigation, not just a guess. And for the first time since February 1st, there was something resembling hope. Not certainty. Not relief. Just a narrow, evidence-based reason to believe that Nancy Guthrie was still alive somewhere, that someone wanted money in exchange for her return, and that the people looking for her now had a thread, however thin, to pull. The family received the note. They processed what it meant. And then they did what families in their position are instructed to do. They worked with investigators. Publicly, very little was said. The FBI keeps its cards close in active negotiations. The details of what the family was told, what they were asked to do, what they agreed to, none of that entered the press cycle in those early days. What the public saw was the search continuing. What the public did not see was the quiet work happening behind it. Over 400 personnel were already involved by this point. Road checks, aerial searches, border coordination, tips from the public numbering in the thousands. Each one logged, each one evaluated, each one either followed up on or set aside based on its credibility. The case was enormous in scale, and yet the ground kept not yielding anything. No trace of Nancy. No confirmed location. No identified suspect. Just the note. And the knowledge that whoever wrote it had been inside this case, either physically present during what happened, or connected to someone who was. Then came February 11th. 8 days after the ransom note reached the family. 8 days of silence from that original sender. A new message appears. Not to law enforcement. Not to the Guthrie family. To TMZ. Pause on that for a moment. A media outlet, not the FBI, not the sheriff's department, not the family, receives contact from someone claiming to have information about Nancy Guthrie's whereabouts. The message does not arrive with the same weight as the ransom note. It does not contain verifiable insider details. What it does contain is an offer. Information in exchange for payment. 1 Bitcoin. At the time, that translated to roughly $70,000. The profile of this contact is immediately different from the first. Law enforcement experts who reviewed the pattern noted several things almost instantly. The sender refuses any contact with law enforcement, routes communication through media specifically, and frames everything as a transaction rather than a negotiation. Real kidnappers with a hostage in their possession do not typically do this. Real kidnappers apply pressure through the family. They set deadlines. They maintain leverage. They do not shop information to entertainment news outlets at a sliding price. This was something else. Whether it was someone operating on the edges of the case, someone who had heard rumors, someone trying to exploit a desperate family's public grief, investigators could not yet say with certainty. But the behavior pattern was noted. And the messages kept coming. 1 Bitcoin became $70,000. 70,000 became 35,000. The number kept dropping, like a seller who knows the product is losing value and is trying to move it before the window closes entirely. The FBI did not engage. The wallet connected to the demand remained empty. But the messages did not stop. Week after week. Through February. Into March. The same contact point, TMZ.
Boys, we have obtained leaked coordinates that prove the police were looking in the wrong direction for 3 weeks. On purpose. By the end of this video, you will see the final text message Nancy sent before the water went silent.
Kept receiving correspondence from this source. Each one claiming knowledge. Each one requesting something in return. Each one carefully avoiding any direct contact with the people who could actually verify what was being claimed. Meanwhile, Nancy's family was living in a state that is almost impossible to describe from the outside. No confirmation. No body. No arrest. No proven sighting. Just an open case, an active ransom note from someone credible, and a second voice in the background making noise that nobody could cleanly separate from the real signal. And then came the month of April. The investigation had been running for over 60 days at this point. Resources that had been deployed in the early weeks, large personnel counts, intensive physical searches, had begun to scale back. That is a standard operational reality in long-running cases. It does not mean a case is closed. It means the nature of the search shifts from wide net to targeted. But for a family still waiting, that shift is not easy to watch. And the American public, millions of them, were still watching too. Because this was not just any family. Savannah Guthrie, Nancy's daughter, is one of the most recognized names in American broadcast journalism. Her face had been on national television for years. And when she stepped away from her platform in the weeks after her mother's disappearance, the entire country noticed. She said almost nothing publicly about the case while it was ongoing. But the silence itself became a story. And then, on the morning of April 6, 2026, Savannah Guthrie returned to television. 60+ days later. Back on air. The country watching. And within hours of that moment, 2 new messages arrived. Same sender as the TMZ contact. Same day. Hours apart. The first message said Nancy was gone. The second said she had been seen alive, in Sonora, Mexico. The contradiction was not an accident. It was not a typo. It was not a misunderstanding between 2 different people. Same source. Same day. Directly opposite claims. And that is where this case stopped being complicated. And started being something else entirely. Let's be precise about what happened on April 6th. Because precision is the only thing that cuts through the noise at this point in the case. By the time those 2 messages arrived, the one claiming Nancy was gone, the one claiming she had been spotted alive, investigators and independent experts had already built a working profile of the TMZ contact. Weeks of correspondence. A clear behavioral pattern. A sender who understood media cycles, understood public attention, and understood exactly when to send information for maximum impact. April 6th was not random. Savannah Guthrie's return to national television after more than 60 days away was a significant media moment. Millions of people were watching. The case was back in the national conversation. And on that same morning, the TMZ inbox received 2 messages that directly contradicted each other. Timing is a tool. And someone used it. Former FBI agent Jason Pack reviewed the pattern publicly. His assessment was measured but pointed. Real witnesses, he explained, do not reach out to entertainment media. People with actual knowledge of a missing person's location contact law enforcement, because that is how recoveries happen. They do not negotiate with news outlets. They do not ask for cryptocurrency. And they absolutely do not send 2 opposing accounts within hours of each other. The contradiction, Pack noted, is not just a credibility problem. It is a behavioral signal. It tells investigators something about who they are dealing with, and what that person's actual goal is. Because here is the thing about contradictions in a case like this. A person who genuinely witnessed something does not forget what they saw. A person relaying real, first-hand information does not send one message saying a woman is gone and another message hours later saying she was seen walking across a border region. That kind of contradiction has a specific meaning. It means the sender does not have real information. It means they are constructing a narrative rather than reporting one.
Sources on the ground are reporting a scene so gruesome, so physically impossible, that 2 veteran officers had to be escorted away in shock. They found the body, but here's the part they are desperate to keep off the evening news. The person in that car wasn't alone when it went over the edge.
And it means every message before it, the dropping Bitcoin price, the refusal to contact law enforcement, the routing through media, now has to be read in a different light. The FBI did not act on either message. That is the documented record. No operation was launched towards Sonora based on the April 6th contact. No new leads were confirmed. The wallets remained empty. What investigators were tracking instead was something more methodical. The gap between the first ransom note, the one with verified insider information, sent directly to the family, and the TMZ contact thread had been widening for weeks. 2 very different communication styles. 2 very different levels of credibility. 2 very different behavioral signatures. The first note reads like someone who knows exactly what they have and what they want for it. The second thread reads like someone watching the case from a distance and building a persona around it. That distinction matters more than almost anything else in this investigation. Because if those 2 senders are different people, and evidence strongly suggests they are, then the case contains not 1 problem but 2. A real disappearance. And a secondary exploitation of that disappearance by someone with no connection to it at all. Former FBI agent Jennifer Korfindaffer, who also analyzed the case publicly, was more direct. The TMZ messages, in her assessment, are fraudulent. Not ambiguous. Not possibly legitimate. Fraudulent. Think about what that word means in context. It means someone looked at a missing 84-year-old woman with a heart condition, a pacemaker, and a family in crisis, and decided that situation was an opportunity. Not to help. Not to provide information. To extract money. That assessment did not close the case. The investigation remained active. But it changed the way resources were allocated, and it changed the public understanding of what was actually happening. There was still the original ransom note to account for. The one with insider details. The one sent to the family. That sender had gone quiet, no further contact confirmed in the public record after the initial demand. And that silence carried its own weight. In kidnapping cases, silence from the original contact is not always good news. Sometimes it means negotiations are ongoing privately. Sometimes it means the situation has changed. Sometimes it means the leverage has changed. Investigators understood all of those possibilities. And they were all sitting on the table at the same time. By early April, the search had been running for more than 2 months. Nancy's family had been living in that suspended, grinding uncertainty that comes when a case stays open long enough for the first wave of public attention to recede, but the answers still have not come. Over 400 personnel at peak. Scaled back. Tips still being evaluated. Border coordination still active. And Nancy. Still not found. The medical dimension of the case had been present from the beginning, but it started to weight more heavily in expert analysis as weeks turned to months. Nancy Guthrie was 84 years old. She had a pacemaker. She required daily medication to manage a heart condition. Those are not minor details. They are the kind of details that shape how investigators calculate probability in a long-running disappearance. The FBI had made those medical needs public early in the investigation, partly to alert the public, partly to signal the urgency of the timeline. Missed doses for weeks. That clock had been running since February 1st. By April, it had been running for over 60 days. Nobody said it plainly in official statements. But experts analyzing the case did not avoid the math.
Boys, we have obtained leaked coordinates that prove the police were looking in the wrong direction for 3 weeks. On purpose. By the end of this video, you will see the final text message Nancy sent before the water went silent.
And the math was not reassuring. That is where the investigation stood on April 6, 2026. An open case. An active but silent original ransom demand. A fraudulent secondary contact thread. A missing woman whose medical situation made every passing day matter more than the last. And 2 messages sitting in a newsroom inbox, one saying she was gone, one saying he was alive, that managed, somehow, to make everything less clear rather than more. The question at the center of the case had not changed since February 1st. Where is Nancy Guthrie? But by April, a second question had attached itself to the first. And that second question was harder to answer. How much of what people think they know about this case? There is a theory that investigators and outside experts have been careful about stating too directly. Careful, but not silent. The theory starts with what is known about Nancy's physical condition. 84 years old. A pacemaker. Daily medication for a heart condition. Someone who, under normal circumstances, had access to the exact care her body required to function. The night she was taken, that access was removed. Whatever the plan was, whoever planned it, the evidence suggests that Nancy was not expected to be difficult to manage. The camera disabled before entry. No visible sign of force in the initial response. A quiet neighborhood. A late hour. It appears to have been planned with a specific outcome in mind. But here is what former FBI agent Jason Pack has suggested publicly, and what other analysts have echoed. The people responsible may not have fully understood what they were taking on when they took Nancy. Her age was visible. Her public profile, as the mother of a nationally known journalist, was presumably the reason she was targeted. The financial demand, $6 million in Bitcoin, reflects a calculation about what the family could access and what the public profile would motivate them to pay.